We go. All right, we are on. Welcome everybody. Let's get the chat rolling already today. I see Sean is here. Hello, Michael. Howdy. My favorite greetings. Unfortunately, Sean, I don't know if we're gonna get time where we'll have where people can ask questions to Dianna. But if you have any general questions, you're more than welcome to throw them into the chat, and we will try to answer them as we go.
And we also have Kate on monitoring the chat box, and so she can hopefully provide some answers in the meantime as well.
Right. But thank you for joining us again, Sean. Glad to see you're on here. Katya and Kate, one of the things that we need to work on is getting a panorama from Yerkes from the lawn for Stellarium.
That would be nice.
Much as I like this rural view.
Yeah.
Also, fun fact for anybody that's just tuning in right now, we are just kind of killing time. We're going to start in about 2 to 3 minutes, and we'll kick off with a little bit of the connection between the history of Yerkes Observatory and the sky. But one kind of funny thing I noticed, because I haven't updated Stellarium, and I'm assuming they've fixed this. Over here, Comet Atlas is said to have a magnitude of negative 14.5. I'm pretty confident that's not. Somebody else that's in the comments knows more than I do, and I'm wrong. Please let me know, because I'm pretty curious.
Yeah, I think it should currently be magnitude 9.
Yes, and I believe it's actually broken up. I don't think it's in one piece anymore.
Yeah. Yes. It fragmented into at least like 25 pieces, I think.
Yes. Oh, also hello, Melina.
And that was back in April.
I saw your comment, and I have to give you a little shout out.
Hi, Kathy.
Hey, Kathy, how's it going?
Hello, Elizabeth.
Awesome, we got all of our best volunteers on ready. Okay, we'll get started in just a minute. I am very excited about this show.
Me as well.
This is gonna be a lot of fun.
And I hope all of you guys are excited as well.
Hello, Steven. Ooh, the Chicago lakefront. I'll try to
I
mention some
miss the
stars you might
lakefront.
actually be able to pick out from there.
Yeah.
All right, it's 8 o'clock. So let's go ahead and let's get going. Oh, Alex. Welcome, Alex. So I'm just going to start off with a quick introduction. For any new viewers today, if you guys have not been catching up on the series, please go check those out. We have a full playlist with all of the previous episodes. We had a great guest last week, and we hope to keep having some great guests going forward. Tonight, of course, we have the president of the Yerkes Future Foundation who will be joining us in about 20 minutes to talk about the future of Yerkes Observatory. Today, I am joined, as always, by my amazing co-host, Katya Gosman, who is the astronomer extraordinaire and our professional astronomer here for the GLASroom Planetarium Series. I am Adam McCulloch. I am the planetarium specialist here at GLAS Education. And obviously, we started doing these live streams because we can no longer do our public events where all of you can join us in person, climb through the planetarium where you can listen to me talk for 15 to 20 minutes about whatever happens to be up in the sky. So now we want to have as many people join us as possible, so we started this series, and we are just going to jump right in. Right now, we are actually showing kind of the live sky in theory from Stellarium. If you're not familiar, Stellarium is a free planetarium software that is fantastic. You can just Google stellarium.org and download it, play with it, look for where everything is up in the sky. Right now, we just have it set to be right outside of Yerkes Observatory, so right here in Williams Bay. And we are actually on the live time right now. And we are actually going to just scoot forward a little bit, probably get a little closer to about 10 o'clock when our sky is nice and dark. And a great thing about Stellarium is one thing you can see in here is that the cardinal points are up, so it's very difficult to get lost when you're looking around the sky. Obviously, when you go outside at night, you won't have those cardinal directions, and in just a moment, I'm going to teach you guys a trick so that you can make sure that you always find your way around the night sky. But first, I want to start with something that is very prominent and already labeled by Stellarium here in the night sky. And it's one of the brightest stars in our sky during the summer, and one of the first stars you'll be able to pick out when you go outside at night. Probably one you might even be able to get a peek at if you're in Chicago, despite all of the light pollution there. And so we have Arcturus here. Arcturus is a very bright star, and as I mentioned, one of the first ones you'll be able to pick out during the sky this time of year. And so I'm actually going to turn to Katya because Arcturus has a very cool connection with Yerkes Observatory, and we'll be talking a little bit about some Yerkes-related history in just a moment. But Katya, tell us why Arcturus has an interesting connection to Yerkes.
Right. So, as a lot of you may know, Yerkes is home to the 40-inch Great Refractor. It is the largest refracting telescope that has ever been built and successfully used for astronomical observations. And so this telescope was on display at Chicago's Columbian Exposition in 1893. That's the first time the public ever got to see, the huge tube, this like 6-ton, 64-foot tube that was exhibited there. And so in 1933, Chicago again was host to the Century of Progress exhibition. And so that was exactly 40 years after the first Columbian Exposition that happened in the 1893. And so the people at Yerkes and Chicago thought it would be really cool to light up and open this exhibit of progress with a star. And so Arcturus happens to be around 40 light years away. And so in 1933, when a telescope is pointed at Arcturus, the light that you see from it is coming from 40 years ago. So you're seeing 40-year-old light come into the telescope. And so that light has been traveling all the way since and left Arcturus since the original Columbian Exposition in 1893. And so what they did is they pointed the telescope at Arcturus and had the light of the star go and basically send a signal and activate a switch to open the Century of Progress exhibit in Chicago.
And so that is a really cool connection with Yerkes. One of the reasons that tonight just happened to work out so perfectly is that it was pointed out to us that 123 years ago tonight is when the Yerkes Great Refractor first saw starlight. So it has now been 123 years since the Great Refractor was first used at night. And so it's a great night to celebrate that. And so I wanted to now show you guys the trick so that you never get lost. And it just so happens that there's kind of an interesting little connection with what you have to use. So over in Stellarium, we are going to turn our cardinal directions off because, well, that's cheating. When you go outside at night, you're not going to have big red letters telling you what direction you're facing. Now, I already know what direction we need to be moving, and that big comet you can see off in the distance, those are the tails from Comet Atlas. They're not that big or that bright. Stellarium just has something wrong with it at the moment. So we're actually going to do something kind of fun. So a really cool thing about Stellarium is that we can observe from at any time of the night or day, and we can actually go back in time. So we're actually going to go all the way back to 1897. And so now we are looking at the night sky tonight, 123 years ago. And the same trick still applies. So if you look around the sky, you want to look for a very famous constellation. And centered here, as we get closer and closer, is the constellation the Big Dipper. So we're just going to connect it quick. And from Alki to Mizar, Alioth, down to Megrez, Fecta, Merak, and Dubhe. And we can actually turn the constellation lines on, and you'll notice right away that there's some lines going off in other directions, and I'll explain why that is in just a moment. One thing that I want to talk about quickly, though, is that Dubhe is kind of interesting tonight. So as we'd mentioned, Arcturus was picked because of its distance away, and so when the light left Arcturus was the same night that the Great Refractor was on display, as Katya mentioned. Well, if you go outside tonight and you look at Dubhe, Dubhe is 123 light years away, meaning the light that you're looking at tonight left this star the same year that the Great Refractor first saw light. So it's a nice little connection, and so if you get a chance to go outside, take a look up and find the Big Dipper, and know that the last one on the side of the cup, Dubhe, is the one that is 123 years, and the light entering your eyes left at the same time that the Great Refractor just started observing. So the reason you want to find the Big Dipper is because it's 6 of those 7 stars are actually fairly bright stars, making it a very easy and great constellation to find at night. And the other thing you can do with it is if you take Merak and Dubhe, and you kind of imagine a line connecting them, extending all the way down, and you'll hit the brightest star in this area named Polaris. Now, if you don't know the name Polaris, you probably know it better as the North Star, and Polaris is not actually one of the brightest stars in the sky. A lot of people tend to think the North Star is. Really, it's only about the 47th brightest star. So when you go out and you look for Polaris right away, it can be kind of tricky. But if you use the Big Dipper first and use that to find Polaris, then you can find exactly where north is and figure out the rest of your directions from there by just remembering to never eat soggy waffles, northeast, south, and west. And also happens that Polaris is part of the constellation the Little Dipper. Now, as I mentioned before, the Big Dipper is actually not its own constellation. It's part of a larger constellation known as Ursa Major. And I'm actually going to cut that short because I want to get to some other Yerkes related things. And as you can see, they're actually Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the 2 bears. And if you want to hear more about that story, and you go back and check out one of our first episodes where I dived a little bit deeper into that story specifically. So now we're going to zoom out a little bit and turn around. And one thing I want to talk about is in 120 years ago, on May 28th, was the first time that the Yerkes Observatory the Great Refractor was able to take an image. Now, they didn't exactly plug a camera on the end. So Katya, what did they use to take an image back then?
Right. So back then, they didn't have any of our fancy CCDs or anything that we now use to take brilliant photos, like in Hubble or in Magellan and Chile, for example. They did a lot of what we could now consider more old-fashioned photography. So the 40-inch, usually if you came to a tour or something, you saw there was an eyepiece at the end of it. But that eyepiece can be removed and instead uh, put on the back of the telescope this box that was a plate holder. And so what they actually had are glass plates of various sizes. They could be really tiny to pretty big. And so the plate had photographic emulsion on one side, so kind of like you have on old photographic film. And so you put the plate in the plate holder, and then you can point your telescope to wherever you want, and then expose it. So you open it up, so you let light come in onto the plate and expose onto the emulsion. And then you take your plate down to the photographic darkroom and actually go and make your image. And so a lot of times photography took a little longer back then because with the glass plates, you had to expose objects that were pretty faint for a really long time, like hours, for example. Unlike now, when I can very easily go, to Stone Edge, for example, which we'll be using later in the evening. I can go on my computer, even on my phone, type in a command. It'll take a really nice picture of a globular cluster for me in like 60 seconds.
Yes,
And that's the way astronomy was done for a long time.
And speaking of
Yeah.
globular clusters, in 1900, it was actually Ritchie who was the first person to take an exposure, and the object that he chose was a globular cluster by the name of M5. If you want to know why it's called M5, we talk about that in a previous show, and we'll probably end up talking about it again later tonight. Katya, tell us a little bit about globular clusters.
Yeah. So there are, at least now, there are two main kind of different types of clusters that we usually look at when we observe anything. At least with the 40s, for example, we have open clusters and globular clusters. Globular clusters are like what you see right now in stellarium. They are a very dense conglomeration of billions of stars, very old stars, so like 12, 13 billion year old stars, so very close to what astronomers say is the age of the universe, so around 13.7 billion years. And so it's very dense, and all the stars are bound together under their mutual gravitational attraction. And so these make for some beautiful images that you see here. And there's actually a lot of things you can study with globular clusters, and there's still a lot of open questions, such as how globular clusters can trace dark matter in the universe. If you want to hear more about that, we talked about that on our last show.
Yes, and it just so happens that I noticed in the chat room tonight, we actually have a former director of Yerkes Observatory in the chat room. And if you have a very high-level technical question about globular clusters, that's the place to throw it. And Dr. Cudworth was actually, when he was at Yerkes, he used a lot of these older plates in order to take new observations of globular clusters along with the old plates and compare them and look for motion in the stars to determine which ones were in the globular clusters, which ones were just in front, and to also trace the proper motion of the movement inside the cluster itself. And so if you're not familiar, proper motion is basically just the movement of a star through the sky. Typically, proper motion is very, very slow. And if you look at a globular cluster, even over the course of 50 to 100 years, the movement of these stars in here is still pretty small when you're looking this far away. It just so happens that one of the scientists, and one of the very most famous scientists from Yerkes Observatory, E. Barnard, also, I turned the stars off, that's why. He did a lot of research with stars and also did a lot of stuff with globular clusters. One of the things that he is famous for is a star that is actually named after him. And so if we zoom in on this field, it's a very faint little star, and it's actually one of the closest stars to our solar system. But it's more famous because of its proper motion. So if we bring up the clock again, the date and time window, and you watch all of the other stars around it, you'll be able to see that this star actually moves through the sky by quite a bit. And of all of the stars we've observed in the sky, none have a higher proper motion than this one. So as we sneak through the years, you can see that the other stars all stay in the same spot relative to each other, but Barnard's star appears to just kind of be wandering through them. Now, another little fun fact about Barnard's star is it's a small red dwarf star, and oh, look at that, we're now back to today. It's a small red dwarf star, and it was recently theorized that there is a kind of a large super Earth orbiting around it that's potentially 3 times as massive as Earth. So that is Barnard's star. So now we're gonna zoom back, and I also want to mention we're gonna go back in time, back to the year we were observing before, because if I actually put up some of the planets, oh, there it is. So over here we have Jupiter. Now, while it was before Yerkes, Barnard was also famous as one of the only other astronomers to discover a star around, to discover a moon around Jupiter visually. And that was the star Almathea. So we have the 4 gas giant, or the 4 Galilean moons, and Almathea right up over here, you can barely even see it, was the only other star discovered visually. All the other ones were discovered using photographic plates later on. And it just so happens that Jupiter was up on the very first night of first light, and I can't imagine that they passed up the opportunity to look at Jupiter through the Great Refractor.
It was one of the first things I think I've ever seen through the Great Refractor was Jupiter.
For me, I believe it was Saturn. All right, I want to talk really quickly about one other star because it kind of ties in a lot of what Yerkes Observatory did. So Yerkes was responsible for a lot of foundational work, and a lot of it had to do with stellar evolution. And we're going to have to talk about this really quickly because we only have a minute before our guest is going to be joining us. And so Albireo is a great example of 2 stars that are in different phases of their lives. And well, it's still debated whether or not they're actually a binary. Most likely they're just 2 stars that are near each other, but not actually in a binary system. One is in the last phase of its life, and the other is in still one of the kind of the main portion of its life. Now, did you want to add anything really quickly before we welcome our guest?
Yeah, so basically stars, depending on how massive they are, they take on a bit of different life cycles. So usually you have a star starting out as a giant molecular cloud that's accreting a bunch of gas. Eventually it'll collapse due to gravity to form a protostar, eventually ending up with enough mass, hopefully, in order to start nuclear fusion and start fusing hydrogen to helium. At that point, the star is on the main sequence, which is basically most of its life. And then stars that are less than 8 times the mass of our sun will expand, shed their outer layers, become red giants, and then slowly cool off and shed that until what's left is white dwarf. And then other stars that are greater than 8 solar masses will go explode in a supernova and become things like neutron stars with black holes.
Yes, and so a lot of that work is actually what earned Subramanian Chandrasekhar his Nobel Prize. A lot of that work that he did at Yerkes Observatory. And I just want to mention one last time, please join us again tonight at 11:30. If you have any questions about things that we've talked about so far, we will be more than happy to go dive deep in there because there's always time to fill in between observations. So please join us again at 11:30 tonight. And with that, Oh, I gotta go switch thing quick. And welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
We are doing fantastic. We're really excited to celebrate 123 years since first light with you.
Well, great. And I love listening to both of you. You're really bright and the the stars of the future. So I'm really happy to be with you right now.
Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much.
All right, Katya, would you like to kick us off?
I would love to. Yeah. So, first thing we wanted to know is what was your favorite thing about visiting Yerkes, and what was going through your mind during the key transfer that happened?
It's interesting because I've been visiting Yerkes for about 40 years. My husband, back then he was my boyfriend, but my husband has been taking me over there for a very long time. And I've been upstairs, downstairs. I've watched Sophia develop. I watched Hawk develop. I watched a lot of the things that were in the engineering area. So there are a lot of little special places all the way through. The day that we actually got the keys, I cried coming into the
Oh,
driveway. It was a little overwhelming because it's been a long haul. It's been a couple of years that we've been working on this, and we wanted to make sure that we did it well and we did it correctly. Um, as much for ourselves, but also for you two, because it's very important to look at the future of where this place is going to be. So it was a little emotional, but it was a lot of fun at the same time. Of course, we all had our masks on at one point, which was a little different. So
We noticed you were practicing
mhm.
good social distancing for the
we were.
picture. That was really good to see. And speaking of social distancing, obviously the entire world has kind of been thrown through a loop over the past couple months.
Mhm.
How has COVID-19 affected your efforts?
Well, it's a negative and a positive. The negative, obviously, is we can't have you there. The positive is because we have to keep the observatory closed, we have the opportunity to do the work that we need to do inside the building. So we're taking this time very consciously to look at all of the things that have to be done: brickwork, cleaning, making sure everything is solid, the artifacts are taken care of and displayed properly. And we're doing all of that now. And of course, we've only had it for 3 weeks, so you have to cut us a little slack. But we're moving forward to make sure that everything is done in a proper sequence and it's phased in appropriately. And it's going to be interesting over the summer months because we have to do some extensive restoration on the brickwork. And when we do that, there's going to be a chain link fence that goes all the way around the observatory. It's not going to be pretty, but it's going to be for the security of the building and also to make sure that no one comes in and gets hurt on the property. But that'll allow us to do some extensive restoration on the Great Dome, the brickwork, the flashing, the roof, interior and exterior, and then move on to the telescope itself.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, what are currently YFF's top priorities that you have right now?
The top priorities are the brickwork and then
Mhm.
subsequently the restoration of the giant refractor. We have a gentleman named Ralph Nye from Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona. He was the one who did the restoration of Lowell's 24-inch Clark refractor. So he came
Um,
up a few months ago and spent some time crawling all over it
Mhm.
to make sure that he understood it. And he worked with a gentleman named Ed Struble, who's the director of buildings and grounds. Ed has been there for almost, I know you're nodding because you probably both know him. He's been there
yeah.
almost 30 years. And the two of them are going to work together to make sure, first of all, that the telescope is always protected during the work that's being done inside of the dome. And secondly, as they approach the work that they have to do with the telescope to make sure that it's done in a proper sequence. We're going to be talking with some of the various professors and faculty members from the University of Chicago who've worked on the telescope over the years, and make sure that everything that is done properly and with the highest level of restoration that we can do. Obviously, we can't take the lens itself out, but everything else can be worked on. So those are the two main pieces.
Gotcha. Well, we're very happy to hear that you guys are bringing in the best of the best. I'm
Yeah.
sure everybody will be very happy to hear that. And
Mhm.
one thing I've had a couple people ask about, and something I've wondered myself, is that the 40 is probably a little overdue for a new paint job.
Yes.
Do you have any kind of update on that for us? What are the expectations there?
We're not going to paint it pink. There's no polka dots. What we're going to try and do is go back and look at the various colors that were used historically. And we're going to try and identify a period that makes the most sense. We're thinking right now that it would be from the inception, so about 1895, 97, to about 1921. 1921 being the year that Albert Einstein came to visit. So when you look at that period of time, to go back over the photographs of the telescope itself, of the dome area, the building, all of the correspondence, materials, I think that's where we're going to try and go back and see how we're going to make it appear. We don't want to recreate the past, but we want to honor it. So there's a little bit of give and take on that. And obviously, we have to be very sensitive to the type of materials that we use in working to restore the telescope. That's a very key part.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So are there any types of projects that other institutions have reached out to you about collaborating on or
Oh,
doing things
gosh.
at your case?
So it's very interesting. We heard from the Associated Colleges of the Midwest about a month into our work back in 2018 with a very preliminary proposal. And
Mhm.
and I still have it. And I've talked to the professors who proposed it, but there have been several others who've reached out to us from Marquette, University of Wisconsin, other schools throughout. I was telling Kate earlier that we're just signing the documentation to continue the ICANN project with Japan, the camera that sits on the roof. And, we're trying to look at all of the various aspects of it, but I am not an astronomer. I'm not an astrophysicist. So I have to wait until we have all of those people in place to make the decisions that would be most appropriate to moving this forward. We see all of the programs as being critically important to expanding the concept of Yerkes Observatory, making sure that it's still relevant and starts to go back into that mode of being vibrant and revitalized. Um, Listening to the both of you tonight, I have to smile because you're doing the things that we would like to see happen. But again, not my decision. I have to wait until everybody else is in place. Right now, we have one employee, and that's Struble. And wonderful man, terrific. We have to get a few other people in place before all of the things start to really pop.
Right. So I'm really happy to hear that, kind of, and I'm sure many people are relieved to know that doing more science research is definitely in the future of Yerkes Observatory.
Yes, absolutely.
One thing we wanted to talk about was something noticed that you mentioned before about dark skies related. So we recently did a little campaign called Lights Out for Yerkes. So when
Right.
you guys got the keys, we wanted everybody to turn their lights off and have a nice dark night. Can you tell us a little bit about what you would like to see dark skies wise moving forward?
When we went to the village of Williams Bay back in early March, when we knew that we were going to take ownership, we asked them for two things. We asked them to be able to put some information on their website about Yerkes Observatory, and we asked them to make sure that every single new project, new home, was encouraged to use a dark sky initiative approach to all of their lighting. So it's not difficult to do. It's whether you're shielding the light, casting the light down, turning down the lights. We have the light pollution maps. You do as well, I'm sure. And we've been working with a very nice young person named Colin Griffith, who is very interested in the dark sky initiatives. So what I'm going to be doing over the course of the next couple of years is going village by village, municipalities all the way around, to make sure that they understand why this is so critically important and how it actually benefits them. If you look at Lowell Observatory, they were really the first ones to have a complete dark sky program in their city limits. And it has been fantastic because it allows Lowell to do a lot of observing that we can't currently do here. So we have to get this entire aspect of light pollution down. I don't know if either of you remember the dog track that was in Delavan, but there used to be a very large dog track where there's now a fleet farm, and the lights were actually turned up, and the light pollution was severe, and everybody was upset by it. Now we're taking that to a different level to make sure that each individual homeowner understands the responsibility that he or she has to make sure that they can contribute to the ongoing research that can take place there. So we're trying, but it's going to be a long process, as I'm sure you're well aware of.
Oh yes, we've been making some progress with our lens project, where we're developing those remote sensors. So hopefully these are projects that can go hand in hand as we get
Absolutely.
this community to be a true dark sky site. And I think, oh, go ahead.
No, it would be wonderful. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no worries. I was just gonna say, and I think we have one last question for you.
Sure.
Yeah, and I guess the end here, how can people like us, like the viewers, the general public, how can people that are interested, get involved with any of this?
It's a little tricky right now because of the fact that we're still trying to get all of the technical aspects of our website in place. So once the website is up and running, it's going to be yerkesobservatory.org. We'll have a second one called yerkesobservatory.com, and with corresponding info at yerkesobservatory.org. But right now, so much of the work that has to be done there has to be done by professionals. I know that both of you would immediately raise your hands to go in and try and restore the telescope, but there's a level of expertise that you may need. And so a lot of the volunteering can't really take place just yet. We have some work that's going to be done on the landscape. We have work that's going to be done in terms of just getting stuff cleared out and managed. One of the things we are doing, which you should be aware of, is we're keeping a very good open relationship with the University of Chicago's archivists and librarians and a few of the professors, to make sure that we understand that every single piece of data, equipment, artifact, everything, we know what it is, how to handle it, how to respect it, how to take care of it. And they've been absolutely fantastic in terms of giving us their advice. So in a sense, they're volunteers, but we will need volunteers in the long run, in terms of docents, tour people, just to be able to help operate some of the equipment, take a look at the new needs of the observatory. There's a lot that's going to be taking place, but in the near term, not just yet. But I'm going to write both of your names down right at the top of the list.
We appreciate that.
I appreciate it
Thank
too.
you.
So most people could probably expect some announcement when you guys start looking for volunteers and looking for public support.
Yes, absolutely. And we are very sensitive to all of the people who have been so wonderful to us over the past couple of years. We don't want to ignore them at all. But right now, you have to give us the grace of time to really work on restoring the building itself and making sure that when you walk through the front door, you go, the same way you did before. The wow has got to be back, and it will be. It will be.
Well,
you want to be the first two to come through the door?
If we can make that happen, then yes, please.
All right, I'll work on that. Okay.
Well, we can't thank you enough for everything that you've done over the last 2 years, for joining us tonight, and we're really excited that we got to celebrate the past and look forward to the future with you tonight.
Totally my pleasure, and thank you both very much. I think you're absolutely wonderful, so I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. This was
You're welcome.
fantastic.
All right, and for everybody else with us, we will be back on again later tonight at around 11:30. We'll be jumping on. If you have any Yerkes history questions that jump to your mind, throw them at us. We'll try to answer them the best we can. We're definitely not professional Yerkes historians, but we'll do our best. And there's a lot of cool observing to do tonight, and the weather is perfect for it. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, please like, share, send this around. We want to hear some of your comments and suggestions. And just thank you guys all for joining us. And we'll see you guys in about 3 hours.
Yeah. Thank you guys for coming. Have a good night.